Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. This is Strange Mosaic, and everybody's favorite, Sophia Smallstorm, is back. It's been a while, but I'm happy to have her here with me. And she has, it sounds kind of like old news when someone says they've done some digging into the Kennedys, but Sophia always finds something different, and it is not any different than that today. Sophia is going to inform us about the underbelly of the Kennedy clan. Sophia, my friend, welcome back. Nice to chat with you today.
Emily, thank you so much. And always saying nice things about my research. And I'll tell you, my research is just life experience. In this phase, I've just been accumulating books. I don't know where they're coming from. I found some on my bookshelf that I must have bought a few years ago, unless I have a goblin in my house that's carried in books on the Kennedys. But I have been reading all about this Camelot in the White House, and then books on what happened afterwards. There's a very interesting book by Christopher Anderson, Jackie After Jack. So I read Jack and Jackie, Jackie After Jack, and then some Darwin Porter books, which you will need a barf bag next to you for, because I don't know where he gets these details, but that's kind of what started me on this dive. I did not know uh, who who these people really were and what they liked to talk about and do more than anything. And it isn't what you would think a president would want to do. So that, I just got kind of sucked in. And then I had to write a newsletter about it. And so that's how it happened.
All right. So, when we are obviously we've been inundated, bombarded with, Kennedy and propaganda forever. I mean, obviously, like he passed before I was born, but my whole life, the Kennedys have been a thing, and we think we know a lot about them, right? Like they look like this sort of perfect couple, and the hope for America. Then you dig a little bit deeper, and it's like, oh, okay, he had a penchant for beautiful women and maybe some drugs, or and the same might have been true for his brothers or his nephew now or whatever it is. But there's like this deeper sort of layer of scuzz that you seem to have turned up that is not something that you hear talked about that much, even in conspiracy circles. So, starting from that point that the book jumped off of your shelf and said, "Look at me," take us. We have a new term. There's not just a rabbit hole anymore. There's a hall. Danny, my friend Danny calls them. She says she has a whole new rabbit hall, right? Like an entire hall of rabbit holes or whatever it is. So take us down your rabbit hall on what you kind of what got your attention, what you were thinking you were looking for, but then what you ultimately found.
Well, I wasn't looking for anything. And I'll just start with my mother did not like Jackie. I think they were close in age, but
Mhm.
all my life as a little girl, I just heard that Jackie wasn't so pretty. Her sister was a lot prettier, Lee Radziwill. And so I'm looking at Jackie, who's rather stylish and stunning and striking, and I'm thinking, what? Why does my mother not like her? And my mother didn't like the Kennedys either. And she would say these, myth sounding things about them. And I didn't really live in this country as a child, so I didn't know that JFK was shot. And I kind of heard it vaguely when I was a little bit older. But I did know when RFK was shot because I was standing next to my dad in Germany at an auto repair store. And the owner was telling him, this was early in the morning, that RFK was shot, Robert Kennedy. And my dad goes, what? And I looked at both of them. I'm short and I'm looking up at these two men, and I realized this was a big deal. So, anyway, the name Kennedy is originally Gaelic, and I think it's something like Sinadich or Kinnedich.
Mhm.
And it means, this is so ironic, Emily, it means helmet head or head armor,
Mhm.
okay? And also chief or leader. So we have a chief who's called Kennedy,
Mhm.
head armor, but he ain't wearing any when he needs it.
Right.
So anyway, that is one of the strange ironies of JFK. And then the story of the Kennedy lineage, it started with this very poor woman, Bridget Murphy, who took a boat from Ireland over to America because she had no prospects in Ireland. And it turns out that the Irish immigration wave was largely women from Ireland because these were the poorest women, poorest church mice. And they moved across the Atlantic on these boats and then took up basic, like scut work, grunt work in Boston. And Bridget Murphy met a man on the ship that she sailed, and it was, I'm trying to see the year in my newsletter. She was 29, 1849. She rode the Washington Irving immigrant ship and met this man, Patrick Kennedy. And they fell in love, and then they got married when they were in America. And Patrick died. He died at only 35 in 1858 because the fate that these people had, oh, they were so poor and they lived in these dank, horrible hovels in these poor neighborhoods. And so he had what was called consumption, which is, we call it tuberculosis. And after that, Bridget had to go, you know, dig ditches for herself, not digging ditches, but she became a maid in the Bostonian blue blood community. And that's where she and many other Irish women decided that they had to better their future and become like these Protestants that had everything, the Brahmins of Boston. So Bridget was extremely determined and she saved money. She bought a sewing notion store, turned it into a grocery. She had one son, PJ, and she sent him to a private Catholic school. She worked her butt off. And so this PJ Kennedy, at 24, opened a tavern with his mother's help. And this is how the Kennedys get their foothold in the liquor business, right?
Mhm.
And he was also politically ambitious. So he was elected to the state legislature in 1886. And then he married. You have to marry well. Today, nobody really cares who you marry because we've gotten to the point where America is considered anyone can be a millionaire, anyone can be successful. But back then, you had to marry well, you had to marry up. And this is what Jackie did. Jackie had, who was very pretty, had all kinds of suitors, but she picked the most loaded and most ambitious suitor on her list, which was John F. Kennedy.
Mhm.
So marriages were arranged in that era, which persisted. It persisted into the 1950s. So anyway, this P.J. Kennedy married this woman, Mary Augusta Hickey, and these are all deeply, deeply religious Catholics. But the Hickeys were already part of the social elite, but only of East Boston, not all of Boston, right?
Mhm.
So in 1888, Mary Augusta gave birth to Joseph Patrick. And you will find in the Kennedy family that they use the same names over and over and
Yeah.
over. Patrick Joseph, Joseph Patrick. I couldn't even keep these people's
Robert,
names.
John, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then they throw in a Fitzgerald here and there, it's just the same names are recycled in different order.
Yes.
Anyway, Joseph Patrick, born in 1888, would become the Joe Kennedy that we know, the patriarch of the Kennedy power clan. And he married strategically a woman called Rose Fitzgerald.
Mhm.
And Rose Fitzgerald's father was known as Honey Fitz. He was actually mayor of Boston. Now, this is all of Boston. So the Fitzgeralds had rammed themselves right into the center of the Bostonian social power. But here's the crazy thing. In his first term as mayor, Honey Fitz attended 1,500 dances, 200 picnics, 1,000 meetings. He made 3,000 speeches and danced with 5,000 girls.
That's a lot of numbers.
That's a lot of numbers. And so, the irony again, comparatively speaking, between the men and the women. The Irish women sacrificed everything for their brothers and their husbands and their
Hmm.
sons.
Yep.
And anything to advance the position of the family through the trajectories of husbands and brothers and sons. And the Irish women were raised extremely rigidly where religion was concerned. And so poor Rose was not allowed by her parents to go to Wellesley, which was a, college that all her friends were going to, but it wasn't Catholic. And she was instead sent to a convent in Holland where it was brutal, brutal. The sequestration and the clothes, and you couldn't talk, and you had to get on your knees and pray, and everything was just very hard and cold and nasty. But she learned to become a child of Mary and to sacrifice herself for her family and her children. So she was the sacrificial person, and the man she married, this Joe Kennedy, was just as lascivious and scruples free as anyone you could imagine, right? So she was extremely scrupulous. He was unscrupulous.
Hmm.
And he became the youngest bank president at 25, the Columbia Trust Company. And he borrowed a lot of money from relatives to take over this bank because this bank was ailing, and then he never paid it back. So there's where some of his unscrupulousness starts. But anyway, so the Kennedy children, there were nine of them, and nine children born to Rose over a period of 13 years. And because she was so heavily Catholic, she would not let Joe Kennedy near her while she was pregnant. So now do the math, count the months. 13 years, he can't go near her. She's pregnant for 9 months at a time. So he became very extramarital, let's just say. He was very interested in Hollywood. And this is where, this is one of the things I was digging for and I didn't find it. The connection between the, let's just call it not just immorality, but the satanic, exploitive, child
Okay. So what I was going to say is you were talking about, trying to dig out and see if there was a connection between the Kennedy clan and pedophilia or sort of this more satanic aspects of, the sort of sexual deviance associated with Hollywood. Have you ever seen this television show called Ray Donovan?
no.
So a friend of mine recommended it, and we needed sort of a when I say palate cleanser, like I don't necessarily mean it's clean, but we had been watching like a lot of shows that were very sort of science fiction-y or metaphysically or like trying to figure out like the quantum realms of the universe type of stuff, and so we needed something a little bit more like just straightforward, right? And a friend of mine recommended Ray Donovan, and it was like a 7 season show. So we were busy for a couple of months, watching one or two episodes a night or whatever. But it's basically about an Irish crime family. So like it's not in that sort of quite traditional sense in that they were working for other people, so they weren't right, but the entire family was sort of involved in crime. And they had moved out from Boston to Los Angeles, and sort of expanded themselves. And I've never really like when we think about organized crime, we think about the Italian mafia or the Jewish mob or certain kinds of street gangs and whatnot. And but I had never really like looked at the Irish portion of this, even though
Mhm.
obviously I'm aware that it exists, particularly in Boston and whatnot. But it was a very interesting insight into organized crime, the different factions of organized crime, what their relationship is with intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies and Hollywood and in the financial industry, right? And how they're, sort of used by both criminals and well, the other criminals or the governments or whatever it is to sort of effectuate this sort of interesting middleman sort of position. But one of the things that is interesting about the this sort of Irish, organized crime is they do not seem to be interested in pedophilia. That's like not their jam, right?
Oh, very
There was
interesting.
no like he killed pedophiles, right? He was not, they're very into they're completely okay with doing whatever to other criminals or drug things or violence or whatever it is. And they're definitely philanderers and whatnot, but they're now I think part of it is a lot of the people in the Irish crime family, at least this is a TV show, it's obviously a drama, but it's definitely based on probably a lot of real families. A lot of people in that reality were abused by priests in the Catholic Church, right? And there's a lot that's sort of a lot of the trauma of those people and probably why they do some of what they do. But at least in that culture, it has not turned into them wanting to repeat those actions. It has turned more into them being, super against that. So I don't know if that's been true since the dawn of Irish sort of, underworld or crime kind of stuff. But it doesn't seem to be like he seemed that character particularly seems to be disgusted by that aspect of Hollywood or whatever it is, right? He had no problem with creating cover-ups for people having all sorts of illicit affairs or gay affairs or whatever it is, but whenever there was any hint of something being done wrong to children, like he was not having that. So I don't know if that's sort of the a ubiquitous tenet or axiom of the Irish sort of clans that way, or if that was just the nature of this particular character and this particular family. Um, but so when you're saying that you went, because of their association with Hollywood, you went looking there, like this also was an Irish crime family associated with Hollywood that was not having any of that. I don't know. So I wonder which portions of organized crime are the real facilitators of those types of things. And it doesn't seem to, obviously there seems to be some of that with the Jewish mob and with like some of the Eastern European organized crime and some South American or Asian kind of stuff, but maybe that just isn't part of like the Irish way, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah. Very interesting. So I will segue into a couple of other things that I discovered. When I was starting to investigate more the death of Marilyn Monroe, that's how this started.
Hmm.
Uh, and the Kennedys, my God, they went to Hollywood all the time, specifically to their relative's house. Patricia Kennedy, one of the Kennedy sisters, JFK's sister, had married an actor called Peter Lawford, and they lived in, I think it was Malibu.
Hmm.
And so JFK would go there, RFK would go there, and they used that as a hub from which to interact with Hollywood stars and starlets. And I mean, honestly, these Hollywood people, they are shamelessly uh, willing to lie down on the couch for anybody. They don't care what the sex is. They'll do anything just to keep climbing
Hmm.
in visibility and to get paid more. And Marilyn was underpaid. Marilyn was notorious for her flagrant search of men, men seeking. I mean, Marilyn was very depressive. She was on the street once crying, wearing a scarf and a raincoat. It's the middle of the night, and two cops drive by and they see this woman sobbing. Today, no cop would care if anybody was crying on the side of the road. But back then, I guess people were a little different and they did care. And they drew her toward the car and she promptly climbed in the car. They knew very well who she was, and she gave them both BJs.
Hmm.
So this is the way those people were, and the Kennedys were no better. They were rubbing body parts with everybody in Hollywood, flagrantly, shamelessly. And but one of the things that I learned about JFK was he had this friend at prep school at Choate called Lem Billings, who I had never heard of. And I checked with Jim Fetzer, who's an assassination expert. JFK's assassination is one of his top topics, right?
Yeah.
And I said, "Have you ever heard of Lem Billings?" He said, "No, who's that?" So Lem Billings, his real name was Kirk Lemoyne Billings, and he was JFK's best friend from their days at Choate, the prep school.
Hmm.
And Lem was so close to JFK. He was homosexual, so close to him that he had his own bedroom at the White House. And even Jackie said, you know, if you are with John, Jack, as she called him, Lem comes. Lem is a package deal. Lem is my permanent house guest. He spends vacations with us. But the interesting part of Lem Billings is that he used to service John F. Kennedy in intimate ways, right?
Hmm.
And we never heard about this,
Hmm.
never heard about it, even though Lem Billings is present in a lot of the books I've read, but they don't dig into the dirt. If you Google JFK and Lem Billings, you will see crazy photos of them together. I mean, they were very playful as high schoolers and chummy, you know, but a little too chummy, maybe.
Hmm.
But anyway, the Lem Billings story extends into the life of RFK Jr. because I read a book about him as well, titled RFK Jr. and the Dark Side of the Dream by Jerry Oppenheimer. Now, I have to say that these authors, Lawrence Leamer, Jerry Oppenheimer, and Chris Christopher Anderson, are highly respected biographers, and they
Hmm.
have combed the annals of Kennedy records. They have approached many, many people who knew the Kennedys very well. I mean, compiled research through interviews and reading and archival readings and investigations for years before they churn out one of these books.
Hmm.
And the Lawrence Leamer book I read, which is called The Kennedy Women, is 900 pages, and I haven't finished it. I have been
Hmm.
sidetracked by, for instance, RFK Jr. and The Dark Side of the Dream by Jerry Oppenheimer. So when RFK himself was assassinated, RFK Jr. became very, very affected and depressed, and he was transferred from school to school to school. These were all boarding schools, and he did, I mean, he was a terrible student, and he was shaggy and bedraggled and decrepit. He didn't wash, and he had some very odd behaviors and habits. For instance, he covered the wall of his dormitory room with black drapes or sheets
Hmm.
and hung pictures of his dad all over the place. And then he had a bust of his dad also on a shelf.
Hmm.
And he had a falcon. He was very interested in, quote unquote, the environment and animals, even back as a child. And the school relaxed some rules and allowed him to have a pet in his room. And this bird, this falcon that he had, would sit on the head of this RFK bust thing that he had and poop all over it. Okay.
Hmm.
And I mean, very bizarre. And then his surrogate father became this Lem Billings because his mother Ethel did not want to deal with her children. Ethel had been competing with her mother-in-law Rose to try to outdo Rose in terms of childbirth. Ethel was shooting for more than 9 children, and that actually happened. I think Rory was the youngest, who was born after RFK was killed, because Ethel was pregnant when he was killed. And so RFK Jr. was just kind of like cast off onto Lem Billings. And Lem Billings got him into drugs, and we don't even know what else, right? Because he started meeting with little RFK when RFK Jr. was 7 years old. So I think he was about 11 when his father died, something like that, maybe 13. But anyway, so that was his surrogate father. And Kirk Lemoyne Billings was an odd guy, to say the least. And yet we can credit him for helping Jackie to refurbish and basically not just redecorate, but revamp the entire White House. Jackie was very instrumental in that. She brought a lot of classic, um, a classic kind of style to America, and particularly to the Kennedy White House and the White House thereafter.
Hmm.
So I have a little niche of a story in that, we heard in 2003 from the New York Daily News that JFK had a Monica, like a Monica Lewinsky.
Hmm.
That person was somebody I actually knew. I had worked with her. Her name was Mimi Alford, formerly Mimi Beardsley, and she was an intern at the White House when she was 19. She had gone to Miss Porter's school in Connecticut, I think it is, where Jackie Kennedy went, Jackie Bouvier, and she had been very impressed with Jacqueline Bouvier. And when Mimi was a senior at Miss Porter's school, she wrote a piece, an essay about Jacqueline Bouvier, and the school sent it to the White House. And the White House was very impressed with it. And they invited her to take a job there in the press room. And Mimi, whose parents had arranged for her to work in some, drudge law office in New York, friends of the family, they decided, no, 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 we're sending her to the White House. I mean, if she can get a job in the White House as a senior just graduated from high school, that's what she's going to do. And so Mimi goes off to Washington. She stays with a family friend. She's 19 years old. She goes to work, and she's only been a babysitter and a mother's helper. And now she has a desk and a typewriter, and she's in this busy press room. And her duties are to cut the telefax paper. As remember, the faxes would roll in on this enormous sheet of paper, and then you would have to cut them up into the individual pages. Well, that was her job. But she was singled out by President Kennedy and invited to swim in the pool, where I read in other books there was a lot of nude swimming in that White House pool. It was an indoor pool, and he had terrible back issues. He was a very physically tormented man. He had more diseases and ailments than you can name. And he told them all to Jackie during their honeymoon. And she was terrified that she had married a man who had chlamydia, and he had venereal diseases, and he had this Addison's disease, which was a, a very serious. I can explain what it is, but you said you didn't know that he
I
had that.
didn't, like, I've always understood, my understanding of John F. Kennedy Jr. was that he was a handsome, dashing, young, energetic guy who had some excesses, and those excesses included womanizing and maybe, drug use, right? Cocaine, amphetamines, even maybe he had tried acid and psychedelics. But I was always under the impression that those were vices based in, like just addiction or partying or whatever it was. I was not under the impression that this was an unhealthy, like a literally physically unhealthy man medicating himself to wellness. That's not a narrative that either I can't say that it's never been, I maybe never heard of it, but it certainly didn't stand out enough for me to recollect it. I thought he was just, prone to excess.
No, 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 no. Listen, as a little kid, he had scarlet fever. He was in infirmaries and hospitals constantly, and in bed. This is where he became such a voracious reader. Okay, he was always in bed because he was so weak. I mean, I'll read you the list of stuff he had as a child. But Rose Kennedy was also a very controlling mother, and she had index cards on her kids, and she weighed them all the time. And If they lost a pound, she would feed them a bunch of food. If they gained a pound, she would put them on a diet. The Colgate smile that the Kennedys had was because of orthodontistry. She made them all have braces. So, so as a little kid, I'm still looking for this. Where is it? Um, okay, I'm sorry. I'm paging through my newsletter for this and I don't see it.
Let's see, I might be able to find it because I remember reading that part.
I
Let me
know, but
let's see. Uh,
it's not in the same place where the other stuff is.
Here we go. Page 7. Page
Yeah.
7, the left-hand column.
No, no, that's not it. Oh, so here, it's actually page 6 at the bottom. Maybe
Okay.
you can fix that. So I wrote, little Jack Kennedy had been sickly and scrawny since childhood, confined for weeks at a time in hospitals and infirmaries, beginning with scarlet fever at age 3. He wore glasses and had terrible allergies, along with long spells of dizziness, coughing, ear infections, anemia, tonsillitis, hives, and fevers. Okay. And then when he was an adult on their honeymoon, he opened this. It was like a Mary Poppins bag, an alligator bag. And he started to reel off to Jackie all of his problems. And they were, so he, on their fourth night, this was a Thursday night on their honeymoon in Acapulco, he revealed to Jackie the contents of the mysterious alligator bag, which he would frequently take into the bathroom with him. Um, on that memorable evening, I'm reading from Darwin Porter's book on Jackie. He came clean with her. He reached into the medicine bag and removed a needle. Don't worry, babe, he said. I'm not a junkie. But now that you're my wife, you need to know about the shots I have to take. I have Addison's disease. She was not familiar with the disease, and he explained it to her. And now I've added, named after Dr. Thomas Addison, the British doctor who first described the condition in 1849, Addison's disease is a rare chronic endocrine disorder in which the adrenal glands do not produce sufficient steroid hormones. Patients suffer from abdominal pain and weakness. Treatment involved replacing the absent hormones with hydrocortisone and fludrocortisone, which is also known as 9A fluorocortisol. So that's a fluoride-based drug.
Mhm.
Victims suffer from muscle weakness, fever, weight loss, anxiety, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and headaches, along with night sweats. He also told her he suffered from prostatitis, an inflammation of the prostate gland, which caused him chronic pelvic pain. And because of his prostatitis, he had intermittent urinary infections. He informed her that when his semen was examined, it was found to contain pus. He saved the worst revelation for last. Before the war, he had developed a case of gonorrhea, which his doctor was able to cure, but he had also contracted a chlamydia infection, which he had never cured. And this could be, she shivered at the bad news that this could be transmitted during sex. And so she says, I felt he should have told me this before marrying him. But basically, this Addison's disease wrecked his adrenal glands. They had basically, I shouldn't say basically twice, they had virtually disintegrated, according to his biographers and medical reports. And because he was so weak, he was, I mean, when you look at his early pictures when he was a senator, his cheeks are sunken, everything, he looks gaunt, his eyes are like hollowed in to his skull. But then they started to pump him with steroids and testosterone. And
Mhm.
that's what filled his face out and made
Mhm.
him look sturdy and handsome. And he was 6 feet tall. But with the help of these injections that he began to get to flush him out and strengthen him against the um, Addison's deterioration, Addison's also gives you a brown cast to your skin, so he looked perpetually tan.
Mhm.
So after that, he met Dr. Max Jacobson, and Max Jacobson became the Dr. Feelgood that we've heard about and started to inject both him and Jackie. He was so weak that he had to have these powerful amphetamine injections, followed by Valium to bring him down from the rush. But he and Jackie were capable of incredible stamina because they got feel-good injections
Hmm.
all the time. Dr. Feelgood, Max Jacobson would come in, inject them. And in fact, his concoctions were never examined by the Secret Service. I mean, he often sent an assistant in there with a black bag, and anything could have been done to JFK by Dr. Jacobson's stuff, which he never even billed for. All right. But they couldn't live without it. And after JFK was assassinated, Jackie continued to get those shots. And it's theorized that her excessive dyeing of her hair, very dark, almost black, for years and years and years. And these shots she used to get, these amphetamines that she got, and other very crazy things in those shots. And her 3 packs a day she smoked, 2 to 3 packs a day, her entire life. She wouldn't let photographers take pictures of her while she was holding a cigarette, but she smoked like a chimney.
Yeah. I mean, this is not like you don't we think now of like what are the concerns around Bill Clinton or Donald Trump or RFK Jr. About their sexual dalliances, and might there be other countries or intelligence agencies or people who have sexual blackmail, and does that leave the United States them vulnerable, and the United States then, sort of being ruled by someone who's not really their, the one calling the shots. But we don't really ever think about, because I'm assuming that probably some people know way more than me about this, but that because I've not heard this part of it discussed, it wasn't widely known, like what kind of risk that put the US government or whatever because of, you have someone who is unbeknownst to the public in terrible health and dependent on all kinds of narcotics. And then in addition to that is having, we can get into this as well, like way more than just, a few affairs here or there, like this kind of virtual, ongoing, nonstop sexual appetite or necessity or something like that. Like how you don't hear that as part of the narrative around JFK about the United States being vulnerable based on his condition or excesses. Like everybody knew he womanized, but it seemed to be out in public. But that part that was out in public doesn't even seem to be close to the largest percentage of what actually was going on.
Yeah, Emily, the term is pillow talk. That's where he was a risk. And I had some discussions with JFK buffs who denied that he was a risk, but he was telling Marilyn Monroe all kinds of stuff. He was telling Judith Exner, that was one of the people that he was involved with. Another one was Mary Meyer, who was Cord Meyer's wife. They got divorced. These were Washington people. Judith Exner was a liaison, well, very closely connected to the mafia, Sam Giancana, and was transferring money supposedly from the Kennedys over to the mafia because they were mafia connected themselves. And so Kennedy was shipped to a naval base at somewhere in the Carolinas by J. Edgar Hoover before he was president because of pillow talk. He was just yakking away to too many people.
Mhm.
And what is interesting to me is that on the night of his election, when he actually made it to the presidency, he was sitting with friends. And what did he talk about? He didn't say, "Oh, wow, I'm president of the United States. I can't believe this. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm so delighted." He was talking about women. He wanted to know about women and he wanted to know Hollywood gossip. This is what he was chatting about
Mhm.
the night of his election, right?
Yeah.
So he was obsessed. He was obsessed. There is a term that they're putting on Jeffrey Epstein as well, and there are other people besides the two of them, a satyr, it's called satyriasis. It's
Okay.
somebody who is just a complete, like nymphomaniac is the I think, correlative for women. So to obsess and have sex and to be terrible at it, not to satisfy anyone, to just, like hump and a few minutes and that's it, it's over. And then you need somebody else. Um, this is someone who is that obsessed and preoccupied with sex, who has that
Mhm.
many physical ailments and is taking that much medication. Um, when does he have time to run the country?
Right. And even the narrative about him being a ladies' man and how attractive he was and whatever it is, that it's actually like quite the opposite. That right, like that he was just kind of this disgusting, decrepit old man who like had to get his rocks off or whatever it is, right? It just completely different than what the sort of, you know, main narrative out there about it is. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's if we can have a weekend at Bernie's presidency based on, just Biden basically being a barely animated corpse, then
Mhm.
you begin to wonder, okay, like is like was Lem Billings running the country? Was right? Like who was running the country or who was running him, right? Because
Well, I think Ted Sorensen, who was his speechwriter, was being given orders from high up. So I actually know someone who got to know Ted Sorensen very, very well. And this person told me that Sorensen uh, confided some things in him. This was later in life when Sorensen was in his 60s. But Sorensen is said to have written Profiles in Courage. Jackie helped a lot. He didn't even write his books, all right?
Mhm. You
He
mean like
this is
Obama?
I mean, what was he actually doing? He was cavorting and gallivanting. I mean, I think he had high ideals and he would I don't know if they were his own or if he was given a script and then he was blown away before he could do much of that. I've read articles and essays about him in mainstream magazines that I mean I came across in one of my books. I had tucked it away. I ripped it out of Newsweek years and years ago, where some columnist opined that JFK never actually did anything. He didn't get around to doing anything. He talked about doing stuff. But you can't say this to somebody who loves JFK because they'll
Right.
like rip your head off. But the fact is that he was given a script to read. And when you hear him give these speeches about, the shadow state, I mean, he talks like this in some of his speeches. It doesn't sound like it's him. It sounds, like he's reading a script. So somebody wrote those scripts, and Ted Sorensen wrote a lot of them for him. But
I mean, I think we have been like, what do you think would be like the Kennedy presidency, right? The mystique around the Kennedy presidency. If that was completely torn to shreds, the effect that that would have on what people believe about this country. I mean, obviously, we are so far not in Kansas anymore that like people of all stripes have like lost a lot of faith in whatever they ever hallucinated that this was. But that seems to be like the binding like that like there's something about that presidency that is so crucial to like what people think of in terms of like their ideal America. But it seems perfectly reasonable to me that if we can come to terms with the fact that like Donald Trump is the president from Israel and that Joe Biden was rule by committee weekend at Bernie's presidency, if Barack Obama was essentially a purchased presidency that ran a really good marketing campaign, like almost more like promoting a movie or a or whatever it was, right? Like that, maybe this whole I mean, on some level, you and I probably both know this is true, but like I'm talking about like on a more clear and overt level, that what the presidency has, at least in modern times, almost always been is just the sales of a front man for an organization, a crime family or a corporation or some sort of, multi national faction that is posing as something else. And, it seems like if you want to have someone who's easy to control, then making sure that they have all kinds of foibles, right? Not just excesses, but health problems or all kinds of things just makes it easier. It makes it easier to manage and manipulate someone who just is not able to sort of effectuate their own vision of things, even if they wanted to, right? Uh,
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. And you know what's interesting? Um, I read about their daily routine, Jack and Jackie in the White House.
mhm,
And oh, it's crazy. They wouldn't wake up until she sometimes didn't get out of bed till noon. They had breakfast in bed. He sat in the bathtub while his children came in and, did little antics in the bathroom and entertained him. Then he read a few newspapers. Then he would go down and do a couple of hours of work, and we don't know what kind of work he did. But then it was time for lunch, and he always had a hamburger, and Jackie had, I think, a hot dog. And I think they drank Cokes, and she would close off their wing for 2 or 3 hours until 3:30 in the afternoon, and they would listen to show tunes, including Camelot and samba and jazz, and they would just have a relaxing time from lunch until 3:30 when I think it was Dave Powers, his right-hand man in the White House, was sent to wake him up because he would nap as well. And then he would change into a different suit. And then he would do a couple more hours work. And at 5:30, it was daiquiri time with Jackie.
mhm.
And then it was dinner. So, like, what did he do? Well,
Well,
we're talking 4 hours a day.
this incessant playing of the Camelot record like speaks highly of psychic driving and MK Ultra type of programming, right? Like that, just this sort of, you know, programming of an idea into someone's mind. I mean, the idea that like the selling point of the United States was always that we're not a monarchy, but somehow we were able to sell people on that they wanted this sort of idea of a monarchy, right? And that, I mean, people romance that like, at a level that is always shocking to me, right? But who's like, where does that idea come from? Like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to, I mean, you and I are different kinds of characters, but like when someone's trying to help their family get ahead, like, are they generally like thinking faux monarchy, right? Like, where do these ideas come from? And, the fact that this one family has had such a large effect on our politics up to and continuing into right now with RFK, the amount of belief that some people had in this openly and very publicly known flawed man, right? This is outsized amount of influence that one family has had on, if not the government of this country, the perception of the government of this country, right?
Right.
Is
So I
crazy.
always say that presidents are brands. Trump is a
Yes,
brand.
yes.
JFK was a brand, greatly assisted by Jackie. He did recognize her eventually as his greatest asset because anywhere he went, everywhere, whether it was international or anywhere in America, crowds would just go nuts when Jackie appeared. And so the presidents are brands, and Joe Kennedy had this crazy aspiration that his family was going to have a succession of presidents. He was supposed to start with Joe Jr., who unfortunately died in a plane crash in the Navy. But then the next one was Scrawny Jack, and they had to, like, put Jack on crutches and get him out there and get him campaigning to win. And they had a lot of help from, the mafia, for instance. I didn't know how many votes they were able to get for the Kennedys. And then RFK was supposed to be next, and then Teddy was supposed to be next after that. So he was envisioning 8 years for each son, right? So that's what,
32 years.
32 years. I mean, Count Joe, who died, Joe Jr., so that
Yeah.
would have been 40 years. He actually had the ambition, and he had an awful lot of contacts and an awful lot of pull. He was a very powerful man, Joe Kennedy.
I think it
Um,
was 32 years with Joe and 24 years without Joe from your
well,
newsletter.
no, the sons, Joe died, so I only counted Jack,
Yep.
RFK, oh yeah, and Teddy. That's
Yeah.
right. So there
Yeah.
was not another one in there. Yeah, so 32 years of his sons occupying the White House and becoming this, it would have been like a monarchy,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, you're familiar with this whole like weird sort of side thing going on with like you've heard of this Curtis Yarvin guy who's like suggesting that we should become a corporate monarchy. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I've not heard
So
of that.
he's like a person who JD Vance and Peter Thiel and all of those PayPal mafia guys, like they love Curtis Yarvin, right? And they call sort of what he talks about the dark enlightenment. And they are anti for probably very different reasons than you or I might be. They are anti the idea of democracy, and instead they would like a corporately controlled monarchy, right? But it almost like, the other thing, like having your family rule for 32 years, right, sounds like the 60s or the 60, 50s or 60s version of what now would be this sort of idea of a corporate monarchy, right? Where just, there isn't, it's sort of like a representative, it's a brand that sort of runs the country. And those people, all those same people, the PayPal mafia, right? The first interview I heard with RFK, where it was like seriously being floated that he would run for president, was with David Sachs, who is part of that group, that PayPal mafia group or whatever it is, right? And if you're trying to have a corporate monarchy or corporate takeover, you need to have uh, on some level familiar faces that people are comfortable with as part of that branding takeover, right? And RFK certainly played his role in whatever situation we find ourselves in now. I do want to say it was really interesting what you also informed us about Jackie, and what a very different kind of person she actually is to what the public perception of her was. Do you want to get into that for a little bit?
Oh yeah. First of all, the money laundering.
Yeah.
That was crazy. I read about that years ago in these books, which then I reread because I needed to refresh. But this is classic with rich women who are married to rich men. So Kennedy, JFK actually had a trust fund. Joe Kennedy provided all his children with trusts that kept growing and growing, and they got a certain amount of income from these trusts. But Kennedy, she had to be very well dressed, and Jack Kennedy could not afford to pay for those gowns because when she went to India, she had like, I don't know, 54 trunks or something. She
Wow.
was changing 3 or 4 times a day, and these dresses and gowns and hats and shoes were very, very expensive. So Joe Kennedy was paying the bills for her wardrobe because the family recognized how important it was that she um, be well dressed because she was very, very striking. And she had a physique that lent itself um, sweeping, beautiful. She was like a model. She was tall. She had size 10 feet. All right. They
Wow, she
tried to
doesn't look
hide her.
that big.
I mean,
Wow. Okay.
huge feet and huge hands, huge shoulders, um, very dark hair. She had very almost no breasts. And, just
Yeah, I can just hear the people say, well, maybe she's a man, like they say about every
yeah,
famous
they
woman.
would have said that. They would have said that had they
Right.
been talking like that today. But so Jackie was mad because Jack Kennedy decided he should donate his $100,000 salary as president to charity. And she said no, she needed the money, the children needed the money, but he wouldn't change his mind. So Joe paid for the wardrobe. And this is what she did. She bought so many clothes, and then she wore them once or not at all. And she would send them to these resale boutiques in New York. Her favorite one was Encore on Madison Avenue. And they bought hundreds of coats and they consigned coats, dresses, shoes, compacts, belts, purses, scarves, gloves. I mean, all kinds of stuff that she would buy. And they consigned it and sold it. And then the money went into her assistant's account. The checks were sent to her assistant. I think it was Pamela Gallagher. Dorothy, let me just find the name. Oh yeah, Mary Gallagher, Jackie's secretary. And it was sold in her name, and then she would write checks to Jackie and Jackie would put them in her personal account. So she was a money launderer. She was buying a ton of clothes and stuff. Joe Kennedy was paying for it, and then she was reselling it, a lot of it never used. And the people who bought it didn't know that this was coming from Jackie Kennedy, from her closet and wardrobe. And the money, she would get maybe 50% or something like that on the
Yep.
items, and it would go into her bank account. And I'm going to tell you something, Emily. I know this is true because I was friendly for a while with a woman who had a designer resale boutique here in Southern California. And I used to drop by and chat with her. She was very charismatic and funny. And her place was packed to the gills. You could barely separate the clothes on the racks. And she would show me these suits from Nordstrom and these boots and shoes. And I mean, price tags still on them, thousands of dollars. And she was selling them for, you know, three-quarters of the
So this
price.
you're saying this is pretty typical amongst women of wealthy men that
Yes.
they
And
go
she
they
told me, get this, she told me that these women, I live very close. We have a very expensive community here called Rancho Santa Fe, which has
Yep.
the highest per capita number of horses in America. And these are multi millionaires and billionaires. And a lot of them are older and they marry trophy wives.
Yep.
And then the wives have the credit card and they go to Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's and designer um, clothing stores and they buy these very expensive clothes. And then this store owner told me the maids drive up with the SUV and open the back and it has racks of clothing in it. And it all goes straight to the designer resale store and where it's sold for less than what is originally paid. And these women pocket the money. So that's how they launder money from their husbands. And their husbands are happy to just pay for these clothes and shoes and whatnot.
So a lot of these older men with these younger trophy wives, their most of their will is going to go to their children. So this is how the women are making sure they get what's theirs, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I don't ever, I'm not a person that spends a lot of time thinking about this stuff, or nor do I think that way. But what you're saying, I'm like, oh yeah, that's like that, that's a great play. I wouldn't do it, but like, that makes a lot of sense because you see a lot of these people, even people who aren't famous, who never wear the same thing twice.
exactly. And she
Yeah.
did this to Onassis. Onassis was the top bidder. She received 2,000 marriage proposals after Kennedy died. And she took the top bidder. Well, there was another supposed top bidder, Howard Hughes, and he was even going to outdo Onassis, but he didn't want to, he wanted to become president, according to this Darwin Porter book I read. And Johnny Meyer was his right-hand man, and Johnny Meyer was trying to sell a book proposal that contained this story of Howard Hughes becoming obsessed with getting into the White House. And he knew he could only do that if he married Jackie. So he made a proposal to her of, giving her $10 million and credit cards to all the, free, buy whatever you want, Tiffany, uh, Cartier, order whatever you want from any designer, I'll pay for it. And then he backtracked at the last minute because he was a germaphobe and he didn't want to shake the hands of all those fans and adoring populace because he felt that they would have come from wiping their ass and not cleaning their fingers off and they would kill him. He was, remember Howard Hughes and his germophobia?
Yeah.
So that revamped his story, his fantasy of becoming president. But Jackie took on Onassis and he gave her a massive monthly stipend, and he she would go to stores and just in a few minutes drop, $60,000. 200 pairs of shoes was one account, and then have it shipped directly to Madison Avenue. And Onassis would pay.
Yeah.
So these women have, this is a legal money laundering scheme. And the husbands, I mean, Onassis said, what does she do with all these clothes? She had spent in 10 minutes $9,000 at Valentino's in Rome, which was the equivalent of 100,000 in 1998 when this book was written, that I read it in, and then 200,000 today. So $9,000, call it 100 or 200,000 in 10 minutes. And she ships it all to her favorite stores. And Onassis is saying, what does she do with all these clothes? I never see her in anything but blue jeans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've managed to take whatever remaining sheen was on this idea of the Kennedy, you know, the Kennedy family. I mean, I've never been one to buy into much of that stuff, but like I certainly hadn't thought about somebody crawling with venereal disease and, being a sick, weak person who, needed to get his rocks off multiple times a day just to function, and a money laundering wife who sold herself to the highest bidder post his death. So yeah, I mean it's I don't hold any hopes around those things, so it isn't shocking to me, though. It's like, okay, well, like it's a little surprising, right? Like it's just not the way that we've been so programmed to think about them. You're allowed to think that he was a sex addict, that he had an affair with Marilyn Monroe, that he dropped acid in the White House or whatever it is, but nobody really thinks about them the way that you're explaining now. So, wow.
And they didn't bond. They were two people, according to all the books I've read, who just could not bond with anyone. They started to improve their own relationship right at about the time that they
Probably
went
because they
down.
had a baby die, right? Like sometimes that seems to either
Yes,
tear people apart or bring them together.
yes, they had that baby who died, Patrick, and that was very sad for them both. And he was beginning to recognize just how utilitarian she was and how helpful she was. And she was very smart. He liked her for her wit, but this was a strategic marriage to begin with. It was
Hmm.
an alignment of two families in order to create a better brand,
Yeah.
right?
Power, yeah, power and branding, yeah.
So when you extend all of that forward into today's era, when we've got Trump and Melania, I mean, nobody's giving Melania the kind of attention that they gave Jackie.
Right.
Nobody is. So Trump is the attention hogger.
I think there's some big documentary about Melania that's being made right now by Brett Ratner, who has some there's interesting issues around him, but I think I did hear that. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like, and if people, you know, I don't know. You're right though. Like I'd say she does not get the level of either attention nor scrutiny that some in the past have gotten. Um
Well, she's like the only one who comes close to Jackie's uh,
Glam,
effect
right.
physically, but you have to remember that Melania she's like Michael Jackson. She's had tons of cosmetic surgery. I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure she has breast implants, and she doesn't speak English. she's supposed to speak all kinds of foreign languages, but her English is it's very mediocre considering how long she's been here.
Hmm.
And her book, I heard a commentary on her book. Somebody said, who's a, he's a he's one of these internet commentators. He said he felt it was written by AI.
Hmm.
And I read a couple of small excerpts from it, and I thought, wow, that's probably right because
Hmm.
it sounds really phony. So Melania was arm candy, but because she doesn't have the pedigree, we don't know where she really comes from. She
Right.
doesn't come from a notable New York family
No, I
like
mean, it seems like she could have been like someone who was trafficked from an Eastern European country into a, modeling agency and then, on to Trump.
right, right.
Yeah.
And I'm getting into that storyline in my next newsletter. So hopefully you'll read that and you'll go, whoa, I didn't know all these things, but maybe you do. So anyway, Emily, what shall we do now?
All right, well, like we're gonna wrap up the public segment here. So if you want to let people know where they can find your newsletter, I think we missed a couple. We usually do like it's been a few newsletters since we did our last show, so people may want to go check those out. So if you want to let people know sort of what you got going on over at Avatar and on your blog and whatnot, take this opportunity to do so, and then we will move over behind the paywall, and I will sort of give you my read on what this all means regarding what we're looking at now with RFK, and see what you have to say about that. How does that sound?
Well, Emily, would you mind going to my Avatar product store and just paging down? And I have some things featured on the front.
Sure. Hold on just a second. Let me get it. Let's see. Avatar products. There we go. Let's go to the home page, and here we are. All right. There we go.
Okay, so that little graphic I did, the two boats with the ion skin support and the zinc oxide body wash, those two things in combination, you don't use that zinc oxide as an entire body wash, but I'm going to tell you this, it builds a slight zinc buffer into your skin. So men who are balding or have thinning hair, you don't have to wear a baseball cap constantly. Use a little bit of this, just like a dime-sized amount on your scalp every day, and then your scalp is not going to burn. So that and the ion skin spray, very good combination, especially now in the summer, since we've had some weeks of a lot of sun and sun damage. So the ion boosts glutathione in skin cells, which helps them to shed environmental toxins. And these things really work. I've had very good feedback. I use them myself. So down below that, you see my bed strip. This is the only product of its kind, this narrow sash that goes across your bed and grounds you. So you might want to try that. I titled it Deeper Sleep and Cinematic Dreams because honestly, once you start grounding at night, you feel so good when you wake up. And there's a lot of scientific evidence for what free electron transfer actually does for your body. But the quality of the dreams and the depth of sleep is what most people notice right away without having any scientific knowledge of what's going on. So then below that is my square of health diagram, which I still endorse. And right below that is the new medical grade DMSO, 100% pure DMSO that I have been selling. And it's very inexpensive. It's $12 for a 4 ounce bottle. And you just swab it on. And honestly, it remediates physical issues. You can read about DMSO on the Midwestern Doctor's Substack. That person has posted at least 6, if not 8 or more articles on it. But DMSO is dimethyl sulfoxide. It's the parent molecule to MSM sulfur. And you swab it on your skin and it's in your bloodstream in 5 minutes. It's massively helpful to remediate broken tissues. In an hour, Midwestern Doctor says it's penetrated your blood-brain barrier and it's in your brain fixing damaged neurons. And I've had fantastic reports from people about it. And this was the purest DMSO I could find. So I added it to my store. And then below that is my new shielding beanie, which I make myself.
Oh,
And you
wow.
can wear these, they don't smush your hair, and you can reverse them and get two patterns, and they shield 99% shielding for Wi-Fi radiation. So there are different head sizes. You just specify your size. I recommend that you measure your head. That's just the feature uh, for the product, but when you click on order here, you'll go to the EMF page. You don't have to do that. But you measure your head and send in the order for the size you want, the pattern you want, and then you have a little cap that you can wear winter or summer and protect your brain.
Well, awesome. All right, we are going to move on over to the supporters section. You can go to patreon.com/ off planet media, emilymoyer.locals.com, or rockfin.com/ Emily Moyer to hear the rest of the conversation. And you can find Sofia's products at Avatar. Hold on, I always like to give the exact address, avatarproducts.com. And then the newsletter is found where?
It's there as well.
There
It's
as
now,
well. Okay.
yeah, you can buy it, get it, subscribe online.
All right. So we will see you guys on the other side. All right.